So yeah, today, guys, I'm going to be talking a little bit about what it is that makes a website quality driven. So we've obviously heard a lot over the past year about how effectively quality is a big ranking signal. And it's basically trying to work out just what makes a website quality in Google's eyes. As users, we can look at websites, and we probably look at elements such as user experience and how easy the site is to use. If it's a shopping website, if you're looking to buy something on the website, you're probably looking at customer reviews. You want the assurance that the site is secure, so your information is secure and the site is trusted in that sense. In the days of mobile now, now we're living in a pretty much a fully mobile-driven world. We want to look at sites that are fast and offer that element as well, particularly on mobile devices. If you're coming to a site from search, you want the website to be relevant to your needs. So these are some of the things that as users we probably look for, specifically what I look for. These are just some of the elements that we would expect to see. But when it comes to SEO, just to give you a bit of background as well about myself, I've been working in SEO now for the past 6 years. So I've been with Branded Free since April 2012. I actually joined Branded Free the month that Penguin officially rolled out the first ever Penguin algorithm, or Penguin signal, if you want to call it. So it was a big month and it was a big year. That specific year I joined and fully immersed myself in SEO, full of lots of different changes, and it's come a long way since the days of link buying and looking heavily at anchor text distribution and through your backlinks and that sort of thing. We've come a long way. But ultimately, when it comes to website quality, as SEOs, we need to look at what it is that Google's saying. So it's okay to look at it from a user point of view, but what is Google actually saying when it comes to website quality? Again, over the years, there's been a transition in Google's eyes, where they are now, in terms of their algorithms, in terms of the results that they rank and index, they are looking at it more from a user point of view, as opposed to in years gone by, they relied heavily on things like link signals and keyword stuffing and keywords in general. They're looking at it nowadays more as a user would, and they want to see some of the signals that as users we'd expect to see. So it's a great document. So the Google Search Quality Evaluator Guidelines, essentially Google have a list of quality raters that manually review websites. Google actually give these raters specific examples of pages that they then ask them to assess. So there's a document that's online. I've shared a link there. It's a 160-page document, so it's a fairly extensive piece, but also it's very comprehensive. So in these guidelines, Google gives specific examples of websites and pages that offer a good experience and that offer quality. This document I've basically split into 3 different sections. So Google talk a lot about page quality, and that's also in relation to website quality overall. So that covers things like EAT, so expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. So they ask their raters to look at content in that sense. And then you've got other sections such as mobile usability, which is an obvious. We're living in a forever sort of growing mobile world. Most of the traffic that we see our clients get is coming from mobile devices, and it has been the case now for the past couple of years. Most of the traffic is mobile driven. And with that as well, they also have a metric that they call needs met. And essentially, again, this looks at user intent and whether or not web pages are serving the purpose that users would expect to see coming from search. If they've entered a specific query, is that landing page or is that website serving the purpose of that query? And that is also factored into these guidelines. It wouldn't really be an SEO talk really without talking about algorithms. I know I've mentioned Penguin already, but more than 2 years ago now, we had the Panda algorithm finally. Well, it was confirmed by Google that they baked it into their core algorithm. Since January 2016, I can't believe it's been over 2 years, but since this time, there has been known tweaks made to Panda. So Google officially have come out and said that they still make continuous updates to Panda. But January 2016 was the last time that we heard about Google essentially confirming that they've refreshed or readjusted the Panda algorithm. But something that's worth noting in relation to Panda is around quality. So when they released this statement at the time that they last refreshed Panda, they talked about how this algorithm looks at the quality of a website, and then it talks a little bit about guidelines, and that's again in relation to these search quality guidelines that have come to light since. And then later on that year, so still in 2016, we had Penguin finally refresh. So this was September, October time, 2016. And it was a great update. We saw recovery after recovery after recovery. It was a really, really good update for a lot of websites that had previously been impacted by Penguin. But like Panda earlier that year, Penguin became part of, or we're told that Penguin had become part of Google's main algorithm. So they wouldn't confirm Penguin updates going forward. Penguin would update continuously. And there was other key bits as well around Penguin that Google now understand link signals a lot better. So they now essentially ignore links rather than devalue entire websites and demote them, which was an interesting shift too. But it's been, as I say, it's been sort of 18 months, 2 years since we got this level of clarity and this level of transparency from Google. 2017 has been a year, I would say, yeah, since these updates in 2016. We've not really had any confirmed algorithm updates. And what I mean by that is we've had updates in terms of Google ramping things up like website security, so introducing the not secure label into Chrome earlier last year. And then we also have got the mobile first index rolling out, and that's already rolled out across a number of different websites. So we've had updates in that sense, but in terms of algorithm updates that impact rankings, so in years gone by, when these updates would roll out, Google would actually confirm how much of their search results these updates have impacted. And we've not had that level of clarity and understanding for a long time now. So in the last year, we've been pretty much left in the dark. Just looking at Moz's Google algorithm change timeline, they've noted potentially 8+ unconfirmed updates. So that's based on what the SEO industry and community is seeing in terms of search flux and general volatility in Google search results. But the chances are that the amounts of updates that have rolled out in that space of time is realistically a lot more than the 8+ that Moz have listed. That's just really, I think, scratching the surface of what we've seen in 2017. And the frustration is that, we see things like this. So this is, you can see that this is a search metrics visibility graph. So since the beginning of 2017, this particular site has, historically held high levels of visibility. And then throughout 2017 into 2018, they're seeing progressive declining levels of visibility. And without this understanding from Google in terms of what they're targeting and what the issues are with this particular website, it's very hard to diagnose the actual issues behind this sort of drop. We've also got another example here. Again, this is a UK retailer, and throughout 2017, they've seen decline after decline after decline. And as I say, that level of understanding that we usually got from Google in years gone by, that's been taken away. So as SEOs and as digital marketers, we need to be a bit more investigative in terms of working out what has actually scuppered this website and what's causing these losses in visibility. And when we look at what Google's saying, so these are just some facetious tweets that Google have shared with us, particularly John Muller. So somebody asked John Muller in around March time 2017, what these changes were. This was at a time that we had the February quality update. So these updates have been known to be called quality updates by the SEO community, simply because there's not been any other kind of understanding as to what they are. And so we we call them quality updates. But yeah, somebody posed the question to John Muller in March 2017, and John Muller came back and said we make changes every day. Similarly, we had Gary Ills, another person who works at Google and has become a Google spokesperson. And this is where we affectionately got this name Fred, so the Fred update in February, March time. But there wasn't really a level of clarity in terms of what has actually updated. It was up to us as SEOs to understand and to work out what these updates targeted. And it leaves us, some of us, it'll leave us up in arms, and it's a case of actually understanding, okay, what's gone wrong with your website and how can we address these issues that we saw, these progressive declines in visibility. The underlying thing for me, and what I've seen over the past year, is this emphasis on improving site quality, which I'm going to talk about throughout this deck. I'm going to talk about specific examples of where I've worked with websites that have had these apparent issues with site quality and how we've addressed those. So as I said, the tweets that you saw there from John Muller and Gary Ills in particular, they were quite tongue-in-cheek and facetious. John Muller and Gary Ills are both excellent spokespeople. They do give us a good level of understanding. It wasn't the level of understanding that we got in years gone by. As I say, they used to share information such as how much of these updates affected search results and things like that, and basically pointing to specific areas of improvement. But John Muller, again, around the time, February, March time last year, he held a hangout, or the hangouts that he runs. And he basically talked about website quality and how, as SEOs and as digital marketers, we need to look at the websites overall. So look at the overall picture and how we can improve the overall quality of the website from a user point of view, so user experience, content. And it's also something that some people ignore, is the fact that it also encompasses off-site signals as well. So links, for example, are still very, very important in relation to SEO performance. So I'm going to share with you some tips and some insights that I've garnered this year when it comes to improving website quality and how we overcome some of the issues that we've seen this year. Number one is to better manage indexed content. So what I mean by that is looking at what Google's actually indexing on your website. So we can gain an understanding of that through tools like Search Console. You can use site commands in Google as well to understand the amount of pages and what pages in particular are Google actually indexing. And again, just to follow on that same trend, this is a combination of both John Muller and Gary Ills, but they talk a lot about overall site quality and how Google looks at the vast majority of your website in relation to website quality. So to me, this is more looking at your site overall. If there's a certain portion of your website that fails to meet the standard that Google have set, that could potentially drag the rest of your website down. So it's something to be really conscious of, and something that potentially needs to be addressed if that's an issue from your point of view. So I've got some examples here. These two examples that have come from the sort of health and care sector, so websites and brands that work in these fields. And you can see, so this is example one, you can see a downward trend in visibility after seeing good growth following Penguin in October 2016. You can see a downward trend in visibility since the middle of 2017, and that's accelerated, so that's become worse and worse as the months have gone on this year. Similarly, we see a very similar pattern with this site, and this site again works in the health vertical, and you can see a progressive decline in visibility since the middle of 2017. The common theme with these particular websites is that both actually have significant forums on them. So these forums sit on the main website, so within the same domain as the rest of the content on the website. So the main content essentially that lists services and products. This forum sits the forum on on both of these websites sits off the root domain. And the problem that causes is these forums are fairly difficult to manage. As you can imagine, there's a lot of user-generated content that's growing and growing and growing. And it's essentially something that needs to be managed, and is something that we've detected and we've worked out that it's potentially something that Google's looking at in relation to website quality. You know, the main site, you know, where the services are listed or where the products are listed, that might be, you know, that might be good content, it might be quality driven, but you know, the portion that the forum sits on, that might potentially be dragging the rest of the site down. So it's become a significant issue for these two websites and these two examples here. And just further to that, we looked at one quite recently that, again, had a fairly significant community forum section on their website. And when you look at the actual number of pages that Google had indexed for that particular website, against how many of these pages were actually receiving traffic from Google, less than 10% of the pages that were indexed were actually receiving traffic. So to us, that showed that Google are perhaps not establishing enough quality in the site as a whole. You know, these pages that aren't receiving traffic. So there's a big job here to make sure that you are auditing your website on an ongoing basis, that you're understanding pages that aren't receiving traffic, and essentially working out whether these pages are worth having. You know, are they worth repurposing? Is there an underlying issue causing these pages not to receive traffic, or are these pages just old content that needs to be removed? You know, it's not simply a case of removing everything that doesn't receive traffic. That's not what I'm trying to say. There's still a fairly significant auditing process that needs to be carried out in order to come to the conclusion that you need to come to reduce the number of these pages that aren't receiving traffic. Something again that we've spotted over the past year is the fact that in certain verticals, leaner websites, websites that are easier to manage, particularly in the law industry, we've seen sites that are very tight knit, lean, as I say, easier to manage. You know, we understand that the pages that are being indexed are quality driven, and we found over the last year that these sites have benefited and they've actually been rewarded to a degree, as opposed to these sites that are big and that are much harder to manage. We've seen sites, again, in the same vertical law, some of these sites that fall under this criteria have suffered in terms of their visibility and their SEO performance this last year. Some of the things to look out for then, as I mentioned, user-generated content is a big one, particularly if you have a forum board or a community board on your website. That falls again into that area. For an e-commerce website, perhaps it's a case of looking at category pages as a start. So looking at categories that have low volumes of products or don't have any products at all. Maybe it's an old category that was created a long time ago. And then it's understanding if you can then repurpose that content and repurpose those pages in order to make sure that you're offering a good user experience and that you're efficiently harnessing Google's crawl budget. Essentially, you know, you don't want Google to crawl and potentially index pages that don't offer anything in terms of user experience and commercial value. Another thing for me as well is, particularly on brands' websites, is if there's a blog, it's understanding, okay, how well is that blog being managed currently, and how well it's been managed in the past. Perhaps there's a lot of old content that still exists on the forum that needs to be audited and needs to be either repurposed or removed entirely. And in relation to that as well, in general, it's just looking at outdated content. So content that has perhaps been placed on the website a long time ago that hasn't been managed, hasn't been updated. Again, it's working out that divide between whether you repurpose that content or whether you remove it. But essentially, that exercise needs to be carried out in order to maintain your website and ensure that it meets the standards that Google has set. Second point that I wanted to cover is the importance of links. Now, you know, link building, link acquisition, digital PR, content marketing, whatever you want to call it, is still an integral part of any site's SEO strategy. You know, in order to rank for big terms that are going to drive traffic and ultimately drive sales and conversions, you need to have a link strategy in place in order to perform well there. And, you know, we do see things like this. You know, there is a case that there are lots of websites out there that do rank without any active link acquisition. You know, I remember a stat not so long ago about how many new searches are performed in Google. I think it's 15% of Google searches a day are entirely new searches, so that haven't been searched for, ever before. So there's a lot of long tail. What I'm saying here is there's a lot of long tail that goes into it, and there probably are websites that do rank without having you know, this fancy link acquisition campaign or strategy in place. But ultimately, as I say, for the traffic driving terms, the so-called head terms that we want to rank for, you do need to have a link strategy in place. And as I say, link building, whatever you want to call it, it has changed a lot over the years. We've seen this trend move into content marketing, even into digital PR and media. There's lots of different terms for it. Ultimately, it's very much the same thing. You know, if the aim is to build links, it's essentially the same exercise that you're looking to carry out. And just to give you an example of where this has been very effective for us as an agency, we work with a brand called Staveley Head. They're a commercial vehicle insurance provider, so they insure vehicles like taxis and lorries. They insure to local car dealerships. So quite a niche sort of commercial insurer, really. And in the first part of 2017, so the first quarter, we saw this decline, which we weren't really expecting by any stretch of the imagination. But in and around February time, so at the time that we saw this so-called Fred algorithm update be rolled out, we saw this progressive decline for Staveley Head, and we audited the website. We tried to understand what was going on the actual website itself, and then with that, we also devised a link campaign strategy that really paid off for us. So you might have heard it. We won an award for this recently at the UK Search Awards at the end of last year for best content marketing campaign. So we ran a campaign that looked at the transport in London. It was called London Under the Microscope, and it sits on this website. You can access it there. And we basically worked with the London Met University, and we swabbed different modes of transport in and around London, particularly the underground, bus vehicles, and also taxi vehicles as well, which was the connection with the brand, seeing as though they are insurers of those vehicles. It made for a great campaign. We detected a lot of different bacteria and a lot of different germs. It's quite gross, really, to actually see these findings come to light. But it was a very, very good piece. It attracted tons of links. You know, we hit 169 links plus coverage, and then we also had it featured on BBC News in a short video. And then it also led to the London Mayor actually commenting on the survey and the findings. And he ordered a deep clean of the London Underground as a result. So it was a viral campaign, and it certainly paid off from our aim, which was to build natural links to the site. And as I say, we had that progressive decline in the first quarter of 2017, and since we ramped up our link acquisition efforts, we've seen growth really hit the roof, really. They've seen record levels of visibility. Their traffic is almost double what it was last year. They're seeing the benefits of such a campaign. And as I say, it's something that shouldn't be ignored. Link acquisition is still vital for any brand, really, unless you're Microsoft or Adobe and you're attracting links left, right, and center. You're usually going to have to embed link acquisition into your SEO strategy. It's very important. And in relation, if you've had any quality related issues this year, look at link acquisition and look at how that can benefit you and your metrics. I've also shared a link there. So this was a blog post written by Carrie, who's one of our digital PR strategists here at Branded Free. She was behind the State of the Head campaign. It's a really great piece, and it talks a little bit about how we can look at link acquisition now, 2018, and how we can adapt to the needs of journalists and bloggers and sites that we work with in order to gain the coverage and the links that we need to show SEO, to show an increase in SEO performance. The third tip that I wanted to share was around user intent. I know it's been spoke about a little bit already today. A couple of the speakers have mentioned it already, but with user intent, I wanted to specifically talk about a concept called dwell time, which I'm sure some of you are already familiar with. In the past, Google have called it out as being they got so metric. So essentially, what dwell time is the amount of time that Google that users spend on your website once they click through to your site from Google, and whether they jump back to the search results. So if a user clicks on your search result and they go back to Google search result, back to Google is perhaps a negative signal, particularly if they've jumped back to the search result and clicked on another result. That's essentially telling Google that your result wasn't good enough to satisfy their needs. It is a signal, as I say. Bill Slawski, who does a lot of work around Google patents, he released a blog post last year about how Google have a patent for website and category visit duration, which is essentially dwell time. That's what it's describing. So, and it's an important thing to consider as well as part of this overall exercise of website quality. Something that I can't praise enough is Google Search Console. What makes it even better is that we now have access to the beta version. They're still making changes at Google to this platform, but we now have access to 16 months worth of data. And within the search analytics report, we can look and understand what queries are driving traffic to our website. You know, we've lost a lot of the keyword data that we used to get from Google Analytics, and this is a fairly good replacement. It's not, it's not foolproof. It still has its discrepancies, but it essentially gives us some level of insight into what's actually driving traffic to the website. And something that I would recommend is actually getting to grips with understanding what is driving traffic to the website, understanding the queries that your customers and your users are searching for and what's driving them to your site. Are you satisfying those queries? Can you tailor your content more to ultimately satisfy those queries better? There's lots of things there that you could do. And with that as well, we can work in conjunction with PPC teams. We can understand the keywords that they're driving to websites and apply that to your organic strategy as well. Understanding, what those users are doing, looking at engagement metrics, and whether you can target those keywords with organic as well and double up. But the more keyword data you have, the higher level of insight that you'll get and the higher understanding that you'll have of user intent. It's a really important exercise that I fully recommend that you perform. And the final one is establishing expertise. So we hear a lot about EAT, which is the acronym that Google use: expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. So I'm going to talk a little bit about actually driving and establishing expertise. Something that's I pulled straight from the search quality guidelines is how Google talk about main body content, which is the acronym MC there. But they're looking for websites to have spent a great deal of time and effort on their content, which is to them how they establish expertise and talent and skill, which makes up that acronym and that area that Google are particularly looking for. They want to see a good level of time and effort being put into your website, not just from the design point of view, but also the content that you're producing. You can't have, if you're an e-commerce brand nowadays, you can't have a site that just offers products. You have your category level pages, product level pages, and expect users then to convert. It can happen if you're a huge brand, but Google is expecting you to have a good level of expertise on your site in conjunction with that. Giving users and customers advice in terms of if it's fashion, in terms of the outfits that they want to buy, or the type of trainer. We will expect to see that content now, and that's what makes up that area of quality. Something that we did, and this was done actually quite a while ago, we worked with Virgin Holidays Cruises on this. So this was done at the back end of 2013. And we basically created a cruise guide. So this looked at all the different intents. So it does have some crossover with user intent, but also expertise. But we looked at all the different intents of and the questions that Virgin Holiday Cruises, their customers were asking, and we applied that to their website. So we created this hub around all the different questions and topics covering your cruise holiday, essentially. So we worked with their customer services team and understood some of the questions that their customers were asking directly to them over the phone. And we then, as I said, applied this to the website and built expertise in that sense. And if you look at their visibility graph, although it has been jumping over these last 5 years, it really, to be honest, it stood the test of time. There's obviously a lot of other factors and signals that have gone into this site over the years, but this content has stayed on the site. It makes up quite a big portion of the website in terms of the amount of content that's within this hub. And as you can see, the visibility has remained strong. They look to have recovered from Penguin in around 2016 time, but then they've seen more improvements since over 2017. And this, as I say, relates back to the fact that driving expertise and establishing them on your website is vitally important. Some other considerations then, as I say, that really wraps up the 4 tips that I wanted to cover today in terms of what I've seen working on my own clients and brands that I've worked with over the last year and that have struggled with quality. Other considerations, again, some of these have been spoken about already today by some of the other speakers, but mobile cannot be ignored. You need to have a clear, well thought out of mobile strategy. As I said, we are seeing this transition to a mobile first index now. Some sites have already seen that. But then we've also got the mobile speed update rolling out later this year. So the emphasis is very much on mobile, and so it should be. As I say, the world we're turning into a mobile world, and we're only going to see that grow even more so over the next year. Sentiment is another consideration that you have to take into account. So this isn't just achieving and acquiring backlinks, but this is also what your customers are saying about you online on other websites. Something that Google talk about a lot in their quality rater guidelines is the fact that they encourage their quality raters to look at how trusted that particular site is across the web. So sentiment is only going to become a growing challenge, I think, for certain brands anyway. But I firmly believe that this will be eventually fully factored into Google's algorithms if it isn't already. And Google do want to understand how your brand is perceived online, and they want to factor that into their ranking algorithms. An acronym there I've used, this is again taken from the quality rater guidelines, but something that Google referred to is your money or your life content. So this is particularly looking at content that is sensitive. So sites that work in, for example, the legal sector or the health sector. And these are topics that are essentially important to your livelihood, to your future happiness. And I think we'll see an extension of this to a degree. So we've already seen the importance of Google tackling things like fake news and making sure that they don't surface that content. But I think, again, we'll see a further sort of iteration of this where they look at websites that perhaps aren't establishing enough expertise to warrant surfacing that content in Google search results. So ultimately, sites need to establish and have a respected name and be reputable in order to rank in search results. And the last thing, again, is been spoken about already. We've had some excellent talks today. Really looking forward to the final few that we have this afternoon. But voice search is a growing trend, and it's something that needs to be looked at. Google actually released a voice search quality guidelines document in conjunction with the one that I shared earlier. So they released this at the start of the year, and I think this is to, again, it coincides with this emphasis on voice search. Simon Benson as well. You mentioned earlier how 2020 is a stat from Comscore, which I've seen before. But by 2020, 50% of searchers will be voice searchers. It's a massive trend, and it needs to be considered as well as part of quality and how you're catering to those needs. If you've got users and your audience are using voice search, it's how you cater to those needs as well, and that needs to be factored into your strategy.